Let's go ahead and start with our opening prayer, and then we'll talk a little bit about the class and some other things. So let me go ahead and put that up. Okay. And
Should we mute or keep it?
yes,
Why don't we do it together? Why don't we
we'll
try
do
it
it
together?
together?
It's just
Sure.
us.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds
It's just
crazy,
us.
but okay.
I'll start it. I'll move my cursor so we can say it together. Baruch
Baruch
atah Adonai
Eloheinu
melech
haolam
asher
echanu
b'mitzvotav
v'tzidkanu
v'asok
v'asok v'torah.
Great.
It feels as if just the family is here tonight, so we can,
Yeah, I
we can
did get
relax it a
I
little
did
bit.
get
No
several
guests, just us. So
several emails of people who couldn't make it tonight. So okay, let me close that out. Okay, so Ellen and I have been meeting. I think it was our longest meeting ever.
today,
And we started talking about assigning parts of the service for the bat mitzvah celebration. And I know we've asked this many times. Sometimes it changes, and I know your plans are changing. But as our kind of opening question, would you please put in the chat if you are planning to attend convention in person?
we just want to make sure we're not missing anybody. And
Right.
this is
We have an updated list now. I'm assuming that if you told Rabbi Sella that you were willing to read Torah at convention, you're planning to be there.
Correct.
So that was and I know those classes, that was an intro last week and they've gotten started.
Miranda, I need your help because I don't know how to, on the phone, send a message. Is this coming through loud? I apologize.
Yes.
Yes, that's okay. But if you just
asked me, my iPad has died, so I'm doing it on phone and I don't even know how to do chat. So I am planning to come.
All right.
Okay.
Send Julia an email. That's
it. I'm just going to write it
Okay.
down now.
Okay. It's Lillian Gradovsky.
I got
Right.
it. Thanks, Lillian. And I'll go ahead and unmute you
Thank you.
for now. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Also, just for tonight, just something else about tonight, Ellen has to leave a little bit early. So we'll just carry on and we'll see how far we are on the class. We want to focus on writing a Devar Torah tonight. One thing that we're going to ask all of you, no matter whether you're going to be there in person or virtual, is to write probably a Devar Tefillah. Before, you'll have 8 months now, 9 months, 8.5 we are till convention. So there's plenty of time and we'll go over like what our expectations of that are for you. But that's kind of the goal. And that's why we're teaching on that tonight.
This is also a skill that just in your own synagogues and your own sisterhoods and wherever, whatever and whenever, okay, you want to have this skill. And this really will be important as far as you're thinking on, when you get to a parasha, what's happening, what are you noticing? So there's a lot of thinking involved. None of this should get you nervous in any way, because we're going to keep this very, very simple, okay? And give you the essence of what you need as far as the writing. Okay, Julia.
Okay. Hold on. Let me just do this in presentation mode. Okay. So
we're going to send these cards out to you as well.
right. So you don't
So
have to
you
worry about, we'll post them on the website. I mean, yes, the website with the class recording so that you have it
So you can
just
take notes or not take notes, but there are things you want to remember. Then, get that down, because something that may occur to you that isn't necessarily on these slides. But we will send this to you and we'll make it very available. So don't worry about that.
So what is a Devar Torah or Devar Tefillah? It's the idea that you can interact with a Torah portion or a prayer and create your take on what you have read. For those of you on Makom, you can kind of see the different versions of a Devar Torah that people have given when they're teaching on Friday. Devar Torah literally means a word of Torah, and Devar Tefillah is a word of prayer. So we're going to be looking at how to do both in this class. But at the ceremony, Rabbi Ellen will do a Devar Torah, and we might have time to do some that the plural is Devar Tefillot. We might have time to do more than one. We'll have to see how that goes. We don't know what the schedule is yet. Okay, Ellen.
Okay, so it says a Devar, and Devar also, I think you can look at the word Devar, and Julia said, it means a word or a thing. A Devar is a thing, but idiomatically, it can also mean a teaching, even though it doesn't. Okay, is everybody muted? All right. It means, or it suggests, let's do it that way. It suggests a teaching, and it's designed to raise questions about the reading. God love us in Judaism, we raise the questions. And
Oops, sorry.
Okay. And that's really what's going on here. You want people to listen to what you have written or what you're thinking and focus in on the questions that you're raising. So what could it relate to? Well, it might relate to the content of the reading. One possibility, what's going on in the reading. This is the next part of this, or it might relate the prayer to current events. And certainly there are lots of things going on in the news, from anything like anti-Semitism to anything else that's happening, maybe elections, maybe whatever you're seeing or hearing around you. So think of some of those things. It may attempt to explain or illuminate, and I love that word illuminate, because what it really means is to enlighten or to, sort of put some focus on something that you're observing in both the society around you as well as this prayer that you're reading. And a lot of times people forget that prayers can actually carry some current events kinds of concerns. It may just be a reflection on the power of what is being read. There are certain prayers that you gravitate towards, and there's something about those prayers or a particular prayer that really gets to you, that speaks to you. So it can certainly relate to that. It's very personal. And it's usually, here's the questions bit, it's usually open-ended, which means that there aren't always answers. And that's what's really nice about a Devar Torah or a Devar Tefillah. You don't always have to provide the answers, but if you have some sort of an answer, there's always the possibility that it might not be as clear as you would like, but you're certainly suggesting something and people can learn from whatever it is you're suggesting. Now, because the speaker selects the text and provides the explanation or interpretation or whatever it is you're trying to show, this Devar always allows the congregation to learn something about the speaker. And we're actually going to play a piece of a Devar that one of the three new rabbis in Potsdam, they were just ordained, and one of them wrote a very entertaining Devar. It was a Devar Torah. And we wanted to show you how you can bring out your own personality in some of these Devars, okay? And
We
so
put
we're
it
going
in a little bit later.
a little bit late, it's not right now, but about halfway through. We will invite each of you to contribute a short Devar, and we will compile them, or we'll figure out what we're going to do with them, but they will be part of convention in some form. Maybe not all of them, maybe we put some of them into a booklet. We haven't figured that out yet, so don't quote us. we have to talk to Rabbi, we have to talk to Debbie, but something on that idea. Okay, Julia?
Also, and then the one thing about it being open-ended, it means you don't have to stress about it because there's no getting the right answer for what the prayer or the part of the Torah means. It's only how you feel about it. So it's a non-stress situation.
And a lot of people hear the word devour and start to stress. We don't want you to do that.
So the idea is keep it short. For our purposes here, 2 to 3 minutes. That's it, at a comfortable pace. It's not to like write as much as you can and then speak fast so that you can make sure that you cover everything in the Devar and then, comfortable pace. It's not an essay that you're going to rush through. You're just going to pick one main point, and we'll talk about that later on, and then maybe 1 or 2 other points. So just as a guideline, 2 to 3 minutes is 260 to 380 words is the standard. I didn't count up the words on a page. It basically comes out to a page or a page and a half double spaced. And now you may find, I don't know about your rabbis in your congregation, mine never sticks to 2 to 3 minutes. You might find that in other situations, like if you're asked to give a Devar Torah, a Devar Tefillah in your synagogue, maybe you'll have up to 10 minutes or so. Or on Makom, we have about 10, 12, 15 minutes now after we get through all the other prayers. So that's just kind of some guidelines on what we're looking for. This is not a treatise on the prayer that you're choosing.
Okay, so there are, and I love the word infinite, there are infinite interpretations of any Torah passage, and the same with tefillot, with prayers. And there are an infinite number of personal meanings to be derived from verses in the Siddur or the weekly parasha. And later, we'll actually practice with some of it, and you'll see different interpretations that people are coming up with when we go over the Ashrei a little bit. So you're going to go into depth on one passage of text that is meaningful to you. And you want to make sure it's meaningful. Many times that takes a number of times through on the reading. Sometimes you get something meaningful on one reading. Many times, often, truthfully, it takes usually maybe 4 or 5 good readings. So that's something that the preparation for this calls for a lot of thinking. And again, with the word devar, sort of another idiomatic meaning would be some thoughts about it. So therefore, where do you get those thoughts? You get them from a few times of reading through. I know when I go to write one, it takes me a good day or 2 days just to get some thoughts down. I don't write sentences, I write notes. And I start drawing lines, or this note relates to this, relates to this, what am I missing? So there's a lot of thought process that's involved in this. When it says to focus on the text, that's where you start. You start with that text, you look at the words. I went over, for those of you that are in Makom, we started to go over this a little bit, where you're looking at the word choice. You're looking at some of the things that are there. You really have to start with the text, and you really might start with notes, okay? Phrases. What are you noticing? Why do you think it's interesting? Don't worry about full sentences. Don't worry about starting off and writing that devar. You got to do your thinking first, okay?
So once you've looked at the text, you can go a little bit further. So how you can look at that text and see maybe it could have different meanings depending on how you're reading it. Or if you look at the same, we'll see maybe there are different translations of it. You can look at the context. How does it fit in? Where does it fit in? Is it a psalm in the service? Is it where in the Torah is it? Where does it come? Between what stories? Is it something that follows directly from the passages before and after? Or is it sometimes you have seemingly random story. You're going along with the Abraham story, and then there's some other random story that doesn't seem to fit in. And why is that? What could be the reason? Then you can go to commentators, you can use Rav Google, but the idea is we don't want you to summarize what they are, what they're saying. We can look up what they're saying. We want to know what you're saying. Sometimes you might need a little, like, what do other people understand this to mean? And why is that different from what you're thinking about it? I can't, when I'm sharing the screen, I can't see all of you. So if you have a question, just either use the raise hand or just unmute and ask it. And we'll stop after this section and, or maybe while I'm getting the speech queued up, and then we can ask for questions then. So.
All right, so we're still focused on that passage. We're dissecting, deconstructing, whatever the word is. We're looking at the words in that passage. We're looking at, as Julia just said, we're looking at where this passage comes from, what happened before, what happened after it, what's meaningful in there, what's appealing to you that you're reading within this passage, whatever it is, whether it's from the Torah, whether it's from a particular tefillah. The congregation, we said this before, wants to know more about you, your background, your Jewish journey, things that you've been talking about, either through the bat mitzvah class or in some other setting, your life, your thinking, your hopes. You got a lot there that you can sort of grapple with. And then we're going to deal with, here's the ordination speech we were just talking about. And after we hear it, we're going to look at these questions. What about the passage sort of resonates with you? We're going to look at her passage and what resonated with her. And then when you get to your own passage, whatever you choose, what about the passage that you're reading resonates with you? What makes this passage meaningful to you? So you're going to look at anything that you choose. Why are you attracted to it? Okay. And then when we listen to her speech, we're going to see, we'll be able to tell a lot about her, because whatever she wrote in her devar, we could tell what was meaningful to her. So that, to really make this devar sound truthful, sounds like something that we want to hear from you, we have to know, what are we learning about you? Without you saying, oh, here's what you can learn about me, because you don't do that. But certainly through your examples, through your discussion, we're going to learn a lot about you and all these things that I read before, the background, the journey, and so on and so forth. All right, do you want to do the ordination speech here? You want to take some
Yes.
questions from them?
So
Let's
I'm going
take
to turn this off
questions.
while I'm queuing up the speech. If anyone has any questions, and Ellen, maybe you can just.
I have a question on, what's where are we getting this passage from? From the Torah, from a prayer, where is?
You're going
what
to
are-
get this one. The one that we're going to work on is going to be from a tefillah, a prayer. We're going to actually work with one that most of you know really well, and that's the Ashrei.
And that's
Okay,
we're going to make.
we're going to work with that tonight. You'll see. So we'll model it. And then we have, what we don't know is whether we go over this class and go into the next month's class. Okay, so you'll get plenty of practice on this. But tonight we're specifically working with the Ashrei.
And what would we choose? Any prayer of our choice?
We'll get to all that. Don't
Okay.
even worry about it.
Thank
Because one of the questions that we're going to ask you at the end is, think about a question, think about a prayer, a tefillah that sort of speaks to you, and it speaks to you all the time. And maybe you haven't figured out why it speaks to you. So that will be later on. Don't worry about it now. Okay, we're really dividing this up. But we want you to feel comfortable when somebody says, I need you to write a devar, or what are you thinking? Let's put something down. We're demystifying this in any way possible.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thanks.
All right, questions? More
Anybody
questions?
else? Questions at this point? Okay, let's watch a little bit from this. Okay. Can you see this now? The YouTube screen?
She is one of the three that was just ordained a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago.
I was just saying some words in Catalan, which is one of my mother tongues. So thank you very much, all of you who are here, and thank you very much those of you I know, part of my family and friends and the community are watching us online. So, unlike my colleagues, I never wanted to become a rabbi. As a child, there were far more adventurous and exciting jobs to dream of. What I wanted to become was a comedian, or an actress, or a comic book artist. Even once, I thought I wanted to become a judge. Always aspired to be a Jedi Knight, and ultimately, why not, a teacher? But come to think about it, maybe I always wanted to become a rabbi, and I didn't know it. After all, there is something of a comedian in a rabbi, a judge, and certainly a teacher. I'm not that sure about a Jedi Knight or a comic book artist, though. When I was doing my interview to enter Franco Rabbinical School, sitting in front of very serious people, very serious, some of them might even be here wondering how I managed to be finally here. I was asked very serious questions, as it should be, one of them being what my biggest influences in Judaism were, meaning being in Germany, and very serious-looking committee, asking very serious questions. What books I had read that had influenced me most? In short, what was my Jewish intellectual background? I stood there, silent, and suddenly completely terrified. I could not tell them the truth. How was I supposed to tell them that my biggest influences were people they have probably never heard about? People such as Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Joe Kubert, Joe Shuster, and Jerry Siegel, or comedians such as Jerry Seinfeld or the Marx Brothers. How could I tell them that my biggest Jewish influences were a bunch of comic book writers, artists, and comedians? So I just blocked. That's for another story. Some might be surprised to hear this, but it's my firm belief that comedy and popular culture, such as comic books, belong to Jewish culture as much as the Talmud and the Mishnah. Many of those comic book artists that so greatly influenced me were of Eastern European origin, and some of them recreated Hasidic tales they might have heard as children, turning their protagonists into superheroes who either saved the world from monsters or fought to repair the world. Sounds familiar? Some of those superheroes even traveled to Europe to fight with the Allies in the Second World War, while others fought against racism or any other form of discrimination in the early 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even later in their careers, a few of those comic book writers wrote about their complicated relationship with God. Comedians used absurd language and never-ending discussions about nothing, especially Jerry Seinfeld, to make people laugh, sometimes recreating, surprise, surprise, the endless Talmudic debates in which one ends up wondering after several pages what everything was about, if anything was about. However, I've learned much these past 6 years, although not enough, because there is never enough to learn. In Ta'anit 3a, 4b, we read, Rava said, snow to the mountains, strong rain to trees, light rain brings benefit to fruit, drizzle, urpila, is even beneficial to a seed, patsida, under a clod. Even the drizzle is beneficial to a seed, even if that seed is under a pebble or under very dry soil. Water gets through. Water is more powerful than stones. Water is life. Water is Torah. In Sifrei Devarim, we read that just as water or rain brings life to the world, words of Torah bring life to the world. Sometimes those words of Torah come in the form of solid white snow. Sometimes they're poured down from heavens with force and soak us. Sometimes it is just light rain, but sometimes it just drizzles. Comic books and Jewish comedy was my drizzle. The water that falls from the most unexpected places and falls upon the least expected, me. The seed under very dry soil, that was me. In Ta'anit 7a, we also read that only those who are humble can retain words of Torah, can really learn Torah. If Torah is compared to water and rain, rain falls from above downward, and only if you are humble enough down can you drink from it and learn from it. So I was in the right position, being just a seed under very dry soil. That was precisely the first lesson I learned when I finally entered rabbinical school. Professor Kosman told us, if you want to become a rabbi, you have to be humble. You must leave your ego at the door. So I let my ego at the door and set up to learn from scratch, seeking for the rain that would follow me and fill me finally with Torah. So the drizzle became a light rain and then a strong rain, and now I can say that not only Joe Kubert, Will Eisner, or Chris Claremore influenced me the most, but also Moshe Ben Maimon, Joseph Ben Ishchai, Joseph Soloveitchik, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, Rabbi Neil Gilman, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Rachel Adler, Betty Friedan, Judith Plasko, Judith Baskin, Tivka Freimer-Kensky, and so on and so forth. As you can tell from the last names I just mentioned, the strong rain also make my consciousness for feminism and equal rights grow. That's why I want to finish with a very clear message. I mentioned at the beginning that I never wanted to become a rabbi as a child. I am sure there are many girls out there who think that they don't want to become a rabbi either. Not because it is not exciting enough, as I thought, but because they think they can't. I would like to finish by telling them that yes, you can become rabbis if you want. You will be asked many times if there are any rabbis who happen to be women in the world, because many people don't know that there are. Today, 2 rabbis who happen to be women are being ordained, and there are other rabbis in the audience who happen to be women too. Girls, if you have not seen a woman reading Torah, being called to an aliyah, or leading a service, it is not because we can't, but because of gender discrimination. Make no mistake, gender discrimination is not authenticity and not legitimacy. It is just pure and simple gender discrimination. Read, learn, and pray if you want, but don't let anyone tell you that you cannot become a rabbi because you are a woman. Thank you.
Okay. Pretty powerful for a new rabbi to be speaking like that. So
I thought she was so awesome the first time. I was in my bedroom yelling at her because it was so awesome.
She has a pulpit in Spain somewhere, and I don't remember. They did talk about it, and they were all going to various places. All right, first question on that. What was she trying to show?
We can do it. Women
We
can
can
do
do
it.
it. Yeah.
We can
All
do
right, so
it.
she was focusing on
That
feminism.
women can do
and
it.
we can
That
do
women
it.
can do
What
it.
else?
women can do it.
You
Don't
can
let
be
any
whatever you want to be.
And don't let
You
any
can be whoever you
obstacles
want to
stop
be.
you.
Raise your hand so that we're just going to call on you. All right, quickly, Geraldine.
To be humble,
To be humble. What else
be-
was she trying to
to be
prove?
humble and open to and receptive to learning.
Okay, what else was she trying to prove? Sheila,
I think, don't let obstacles get in your way. Keep going.
what else was, okay, these are all great ideas, but you see, they're different from each other. All right, Denise.
Ooh, okay, I got kicked off, but luckily everybody stayed on.
All right,
Just
Denise.
because it's not something that you think of as a child doesn't mean it's impossible as an adult, because she grew and she realized that this was her calling.
Okay, what else was she? These are great. What else? Jill?
I feel like when she was talking about being a comedian and an artist, not so much, and a teacher, all those things, it makes a good rabbi. Being, having a sense of humor, being able to teach. I mean, all those characteristics, I thought that she talked about herself, what she wanted to do, really would make her a good rabbi.
And she
Okay.
mentioned that those
Yeah.
are parts of being a rabbi.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get
Marlene,
other hands. All right. Corinne, we heard from you already?
Marlene, Jamie, and then Corinne.
Okay. Marlene?
Her pride in being a woman and her pride in being a rabbi and her desire to pass that feeling and experience and desire onto the next generation of female Jewish
Okay.
potential rabbis.
Okay. Who was next, Julia?
Jamie.
Jamie? These are great, all of them.
The takeaway I got is that inspiration can come from anywhere.
Okay. All right, good. Anybody? And
Corinne and then Judy. I think right. Corinne and then
did we
Judy.
get everybody?
Don't let people try. Don't listen to what other people think. You can be whatever you want to be if you really put your mind to it, and don't be influenced by the fact that rabbis are only men. It's kind of idea,
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Judy.
All right. And Judy?
I think she was trying to show the human side of her, the human side of being a rabbi.
Okay.
What
How many-
about
Go ahead,
what
Julia.
about how she took that? She took the text, or did you talk about that when I was trying to get back on?
No.
She took the text and the idea, the text from the Talmud that said that the water can be a drizzle or a storm, but the water is Torah. And then how she took that into that her Torah were these comic book writers in the beginning. She used that same water analogy. So I thought that was really interesting, using the words of the text.
That she was a seed and the water made it develop. It was a beautiful statement. Yeah.
And neither one of, I mean, what she did really wasn't a Devar Torah in the way we're talking about it with straight from the Torah, nor was it straight from a tefillah. She had another question she had to answer. And what was the question she was trying to answer? It's a little bit different. What was the question that she was trying to answer? You talked about what you saw as the main focus, but what was the question that she was trying to answer? Ruth?
She was trying to answer where her Judaism and why she was becoming a rabbi came from. And she felt that it was from all these different people, some of them like comedians and writers and stuff. And that's where her Judaism came from, not from necessarily.
Not in a conventional place, right?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? What was she trying to answer? Sometimes what you end up with is different from what you're trying to answer. And so you have to kind of make peace with that and figure out what's the important part. Am I trying to answer something or am I trying to show something? And they're very different things. They may sound as if they're the same, and they're not. Okay, what was she trying to answer? In what context was this being written? I mean, what did she write this for? Yes, she was getting ordained, but where did all of that thought come from? What prompted all of these thoughts?
The interviews that she had with the rabbis to enter the rabbinical school. They asked her these questions and this is her answer to them.
She didn't go that conventional route, did she?
No.
They probably didn't know what all those serious people. I loved it even in the presentation. And she played with it. But did she have a sense of humor?
Yeah.
Who says you can't have one in a Devar? You can't, obviously, you're not going to be off color, but seriously, you can have a sense of humor. That is part of people getting to know you. So if that's what you're comfortable with, no, you don't have to have a sense of humor. But if you want to have one and it's done, so that it's appropriate for whatever you're working with, that can be done. do you feel as if you know her?
Yeah, I think she was answering the question, who am I?
Okay. All right, good.
And we heard all about that answer.
You know, we have a grasp on her. How many would like to, listen to more of what she has to talk about? I loved listening to her. I thought this was not dull. There was nothing dull here. I had a real sense of who she was, and if I were on a committee that was looking for a rabbi, I'd want to at least interview her and talk to her. Maybe it's not what my congregation would want. Maybe it is exactly what my congregation would want. But they were all hired immediately, and she especially.
I think she's going to
Go ahead.
Barcelona.
Okay.
She
so-
said
Yeah, she made the reference to the Catalan, her mother.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
so keep
Go
that
ahead.
in mind now as we go back here. Okay. So where do you start? Well, as we've said, read the Torah portion and the prayer. Read it in a chumash or a siddur that you have. Read it in more than one siddur, because we'll see that translation matters. So if you have more than one, read it again, as many times. As Ellen said, sometimes it just takes time. Read it, put it down, come back to it in a day or two. Sometimes it just needs to sit and marinate a little bit. So you think about that, think about it. And we're not saying, you could be looking at the whole prayer or the whole parsha, but you're not going to write about all of that. You're going to pick something. You'll find that you pick something very specific that strikes you. Maybe it could be one word. You could write an entire Devar Tefillah on one word of the prayer. Why is that word there? What does that word mean? Maybe that word reminds you of something else. And again, I keep going back to Makom, but Doreen taught last Friday, and it was Lech Lecha, about going to a land, that I will show you. And she talked about her family coming to this country. Was that specifically about Abraham? No, but it was a great teaching on that parsha, because at least for me, started me thinking about, oh, well, where did my family come from, and what must have it been like for them to pick up from a land they knew to go to a land they had no idea what was there. So read it again, and then start just jotting down these thoughts that come into your mind. What does this word mean? What does it mean, this phrase together? What does it mean? And you'll see when we go through this how it works. Don't just summarize. Prayers are a lot harder to summarize than a narrative form. But this is your kind of your first impressions as you're starting out.
And don't censor yourself as you're taking notes. Sometimes people get in trouble because they say, oh, they're not going to like this, so this isn't right. Don't do that. Get your ideas down. You'll go through them later. But just anything that pops into your head, as wacky as you think it might sound, there may be something of real original thought there that can get you started on something where your sense of what's going on in the parasha, in the Torah portion, or in the tefillah may be something very, very unique and really brilliant. So, you're as good as a lot of these scholars, because if you're speaking about something in a very genuine way, then you have come up with something that you want to get down on paper. So don't censor yourself. Don't depend, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but don't depend only on somebody else's commentary. Stay with your own thoughts. That's when you start to do this, that's the starting place, your own brain, brainstorming, whatever you want to call it, but get those things down and don't don't throw out anything at that point.
And again,
at the beginning.
there's nothing wrong because it's your ideas about it. So nobody could say,
Right.
well, you're wrong. It doesn't mean that. Well, how do they know? It could mean what you
Right.
think. And it could mean, Corinne, you could write down one thing and Debbie could write down one thing and Sheila, all of you could be writing about the Shema, let's say. And we could have, how many people we have? We have 29 people on the screen. You'd have 29 completely different interpretations of that. So we have come up with some prompts to get you started.
All right. So we're going to do this together. All right. We'll do this one together. How does the subject matter relate to something that's happening in today's world? All right. So you're reading whatever it is you're writing about, some part of a tefillah, maybe it's a part of the parashah, and you go, all right, I'm not inspired. So let's ask some of these prompt questions. First question, what's happening in today's world? Well, we just went through an election. Okay, we still have a lot of issues with that. We have a lot of anti-Semitism. We have, people that are in, I'm on the politics kick a little bit without saying anything. People that are making policy for us that maybe we can't understand why a certain person is or what they had to say or whatever. Again, no, I'm not saying anything about anybody, but just some general prompts here. How do the teachings from the Torah or the tefillah that you're looking at help to inform or contradict our experiences with these events? Maybe you read something from the Torah and it sort of seems to suggest something that seems so contrary or so opposite from everything you had been thinking about whatever's going on in the world. So again, these are sort of ambiguous type questions that we're giving you as prompts, but that's okay because it means that they are dense enough as questions to get you thinking in a lot of directions. All right, Julia, take the second part.
There's also lots of themes like in the Torah. I mean, the theme of leadership, works throughout the whole Torah. Well, we have leaders today. How are our leaders today? Like the biblical leaders? Are they good leaders? Were the biblical leaders good leaders? What if we put them, if they were our president today, would they be popular presidents? Would they get the job done? There's all kinds of ways to relate it to current times. What laws or teachings from Judaism come to mind when you read this? So, there's a lot about thanks. A lot of the prayers are prayers about, of Thanksgiving. Well, I mean, now we're coming up on Thanksgiving. That's something, what we know about tzedakah, we know about tikkun olam, repairing the world. What other kind of connections is it something, this phrase that I read in this prayer, or that sounds like something that we say in the Friday night service. Even if you don't know all the prayers, you may not be able to make these connections, but maybe you do. Maybe that sounds like something that I read, that's something in the Kaddish or something like that, words or phrases. Why do those come to mind? What is the link? Is there any link, do you think, that could be made between the prayer or the section you're working on and something else that comes to mind?
And you may notice something in those laws or teachings in Judaism that you thought one way about, and then you read something else in the tefillah and it seems to contradict what you thought was going on, or you're thinking about what's happening in the world, and that this seems to be such a major contradiction. So how, as a Jew, do you reconcile the contradiction that's in the tefillah with what's actually happening in the world? How do you handle that? Okay, so that's content, and we're continuing with content here. Does this reading or prayer contradict or affirm, agree, or support some of these other laws or teachings? What have you learned? What are some of the laws, as Julia was just mentioning? Why? How can you reconcile exactly what I was just talking about, opposing laws or points of view? And you might say, why does this tefillah say this when, like, get rid of your enemies when we're not supposed to kill? How do you reconcile this? So there's a decided contradiction. What does the contradiction imply about Judaism? Again, these are only a bunch of questions that we are giving you to help you to literally unpack whatever it is that you're reading. You still haven't gone to other commentaries, and you shouldn't at this point. Rely on what your own gut feelings are about some of these, perhaps contradictions that you may have thought about before, or maybe have not thought about before. All right, Julia, you can take the next one. We'll go every other one.
Do you see any interesting characters? So this might make more sense for a Torah portion. Are there people in your story, in your section that you're reading? But it could be in the prayers too. Who was the person? Who do you think was the person that wrote this prayer? If it's a psalm, maybe it was King David. Was he happy? Was he sad? Why did he write this? Who was that person in the Torah sections that you might be reading? What's interesting about these characters? When we read about now these characters in Genesis, they're not perfect. They're flawed characters. Why is that? What does that make them more interesting? Do we appreciate them more that they're not perfect? They're not ideals, our matriarchs and patriarchs. What other characters do you think of? I mean, it's clear when you think Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, it sets up comparisons between them, similarities, differences. What other characters have those kind of roles in other books that you've read? It could be modern books or historical figures. It doesn't have to be biblical characters. Maybe you compare it to Ahab and Moby Dick. I don't know, whatever, maybe it's a book you've just finished reading for your book club. And it's like, that really reminds me of this story. And maybe that's something that you want to think about. And again, this is a 2 to 3 minute talk that we're talking about here. So really, it's like one kind of hook, one main idea will carry you through easily 1 page or a page and a half of text. I'll go on with gaps.
Go.
Okay, so gaps in the text. What is missing about what you're reading? They're really interesting because it's purposeful in their omission, and it can send you off in directions. Like maybe some of you know that after the Akedah, after Abraham goes to sacrifice Isaac, you don't hear what Sarah's thinking. You never hear from Sarah again. What did she think when Abraham came back and said, "Oh, look what I did," or Isaac came, "Look what Dad tried to do to me." You don't hear that. Why don't you ever hear from that? We're going to look at Ashrei in a little bit, and you may know that Ashrei is an acrostic. It's all the letters of the alphabet, but it's missing a letter. There's no nun. Why isn't there nun? Why is that missing? Maybe that's a Devar Tefillah on the missing nun.
And so you might want to look at, if you know the nun is missing, what happened before, what was in it before, what's afterwards. The gap is equally as important many times as what you have in there. So it's not a mistake, but rather there's something that needs to be expanded on, elaborated on, whatever. Ask a lot of questions when you notice a gap. It's purposeful.
Also, and we're going to get to this, we were talking about earlier today, and we're going to get to it later in the year, but those gaps is where Midrash comes in, where they have to explain something, what happened there. Then you find midrash. You find stories that have been that the rabbis created to fill in the gaps.
Okay. All right.
That's
Now,
that's
go
like
ahead.
the red tent and
Right.
Dina's story.
Right, and that actually is, that whole thing is midrash, because she
Yeah.
had to fill in what she had learned. You know, Anita Diamond, the author, filled that in with things that she knew about the lifestyle, but it became expanded into so much more as a book. So midrash, as Julie was saying, emerged out of the gaps where they filled in. So either we looked at words that were missing, or we looked at characters and what we didn't get information on. We thought about what we know about human nature. Why might they react this way? You know, when Rebecca clearly favors Jacob as one of the twins, that she really, you know, gravitates towards Jacob and not Esau. Why? What is there about Jacob? And now some of that is given, but not a lot. Why does Esau, you know, sort of instill or, you know, catalyze these negative feelings? What is there about it? Why does Isaac, the father, have such an affinity towards his own son Esau? You know, is it because Rebecca favors Jacob? You know, there were all kinds of possibilities, but we know a lot about family dynamics. We're experts from what we see from our own families. We don't need to gravitate towards commentary there. Okay, we can rely on what we've noticed. All right, so now we're on word choice, okay? And we've mentioned this in, you know, different times already. What do you notice about word choice? And one of the things that we said already is read a couple of different translations of either the prayer or the parasha, whatever you're writing on, and look at the word choice and the changes in the word. I know we keep talking about makom, and many of you are on, many of you aren't. And it's worth, you know, maybe tuning in on, you know, on Tuesday mornings, Wednesday mornings, or Friday mornings to kind of get a sense of some of this. But one of the things when Rabbi Sella is teaching, she points out a lot of the different, you know, the differences in the words. When do we have one word and we come up with the synonym in another translation? What is there? What's the difference in the meaning, the subtleties within one translation and another translation? What has happened to everything around those words? Do any words repeat? This is one of my favorites. Why do we have certain words repeating? What is the point? Is it only for emphasis? Probably it's for something more. Is there an actual refrain? Sometimes you hear a part of a phrase or even a whole sentence that repeats in a lot of the tefillot. How can this refrain resonate in today's world? I mean, you might look at a refrain and just write on that refrain only and say, wow, that's something that is really pertinent to a lot of the things that are happening in today's world, or it's not, or how would it be accepted or not accepted in today's world? You can take this in a lot of different directions. So word choice, and then I missed structure of the phrases or sentences, just looking at the structure. Okay, the question came up about makom. We'll take that question right after we finish this. Okay, Julie, you want to take the next part?
So it's not just repetition of words, but it's repetition of sounds. So this is harder in the English, you know, and we don't expect you to, you know the Hebrew and be able to do this analysis of the Hebrew. You might see it. That might be one of the sources. If you can, you know, if you can see, often the English, the translation is interpretation. So sometimes in the English, they'll make the English rhyme too. If the Hebrew rhymes, then they'll try to make the English rhyme, but then they might not translate it so directly in order to make the rhyme. You know, they might get the feeling of the passage. But you can look at the sounds. You can look, we're talking about the roots. Every Hebrew word has a 3-letter root to it called the shoresh. And all the words like, I'm blanking now, but like todah and hodu, and they're all forms of that, the word for thanks. So, you know, those maybe the root is related, and they might all be translated as thanks, but maybe not.
And, don't be afraid to go to a dictionary on this. A lot of times, if you understand the concept of a shoresh and certain consonants, okay, like a yud, a lamed, a mem, whatever it is, those letters will repeat. I just made up that one, but actually there is one. The word dream, chalom, is sort of related to that. We didn't mention the chet, but that's, you can look these things up in a Hebrew English dictionary, and you can see the relationship with some of these words that have the same 3 consonants. Occasionally, there are words that have only 2 consonants, but probably 90% of all Hebrew words have just 3 consonants that are used pretty much through all the words that relate to it. And it says, so this shoresh, okay, which means root, I mean, exactly what it is, like the root of the tree and so forth, are most definitely related and often open up your discussion of the tefillah or the Torah portion. So looking at this, if you take one verse of a prayer and you start to notice that there seems to be a similarity between a couple of words and you want to check yourself, pick up a dictionary, a Hebrew English dictionary. You can get them off of Amazon or wherever. They can be secondhand. You don't need to spend a lot of money. A little paperback will
Or
do
I'm
it.
sure the rabbis would be happy to talk to you about it
Okay.
too, if you have some idea.
Okay. So, that's there, and that'll give you a sense of maybe a different interpretation than you had realized. And a lot of times that can open up because, again, you're not taking anybody else's commentary, but you are taking, just a sense of how these words fit in and fit together. Okay. Imagery, pictures. All right. You're looking at something, you're looking at a Torah portion, you're looking at a tefillah, which is the word here. How does this portion pique any of your 5 senses? What senses are, the hearing, the seeing, the smelling, the touching, the tasting, anything there? Are there any extended metaphors where you've got a comparison? And
Like
it
the
just sort of
water
goes,
in the
yeah,
rabbis
she used that.
talk.
Good.
She talked about
Good.
water it being snow and a storm and a drizzle, and all of those things are water, but they have different emotions. They bring up different emotions, different images.
And she stayed with that all through her Devar. So that kept it really organized. When she went to write that, she kept that metaphor going the whole way. And what is there about, that particular metaphor, the rain, and she was able to divide it and subdivide it even. So how do these comparisons help you to understand the text? She did a number of things here where she pulled this all together. She was working a lot with the imagery. Okay.
Okay, so again, just all these different prompts on content and on language and on imagery. How do they help you understand this prayer or Torah portion? How do they illuminate the power? How do they work to make this a powerful piece that you're reading? Is it the language? Is it the imagery? Is it the content? What is it that makes that powerful? How do they catalyze questions in your mind? What is it about it? Is it the again, content, language, imagery? What is it that's making you think of these questions?
And you don't have to get all of these. Just
right,
focus
these are
on
just
one.
right.
Just
These
one.
are just prompts. And then how do they make the teachings relevant to you? Okay. So we're going to go through this together, and then we're going to have one. We'll see how much time we have at the end. So I have, if you have your blue Siddur that we mailed to you, and you want to follow along on that, that's on page 154 is the Ashrei, or you can find it in any Siddur that you have, or you can look at the screen. So on the right-hand side, we put the Hebrew, Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha Od Yehalalu Chasela, Ashrei Ha'am Shekachalo, Ashrei Ha'am She'Adonai Elohav. And then I looked because I did this first in Lev Shalem and then went to that blue paperback one. It's translated as joyous or blessed or happy are they who dwell in your house. They shall praise you forever. And then joyous the people who are so favored, joyous the people whose God is Adonai. Those are the first two lines from Ashrei. So we're going to use the prompts, we're going to use those ideas to come up with some questions that we want to think about. You would do the questions, Ellen?
Yeah, so we know, we talked about the different words. And, as Julia read, we've got joyous, blessed, happy, all working off the word Ashrei. And Osher in this case means happiness, usually. However, we've got translations of blessed, which clearly has a different meaning. Happy is it's not even as much generally as joyous. So what are the distinctions among the translations? And certainly if you wanted to start there, you might jot down some differences that you're noticing among those three words. And maybe, and we just took a couple of questions that had already, we'd already gone through. How does this one fit in with anti-Semitism today? And, everything can fit in with anti-Semitism. What happens to, people who dwell in your house and then they experience anti-Semitism? All right, before we go on, any thoughts on that? Just where, I went through. How do you account for anti-Semitism and what's written here in those first two lines of Ashrei? Who do we have hands up? I can't see.
Sheila, are
Who
you
has a
trying
hand
to
up?
unmute?
No.
Looks
Anybody?
like she was talking.
Do you
Look
see
at the
any?
second line, Denise.
Well, I think the anti-Semitism comes from the fact that as Jews, we believe together and we stick together and we don't compromise what we believe for whatever is going on at the time. There are certain basic tenets of our beliefs that never change, and it keeps us steady.
So what part of Ashrei makes you think of that? What part of this text makes you think of that?
These two lines.
Happy are they that dwell in your house, who dwell in your house. Because it's not just a house, it's the religion. It's not when it says dwell in your house, it's our religion and what we believe. So that's
Denise, how would that cause anti-Semitism?
Because I think people feel threatened by that. I think people feel threatened by the fact that we are so committed to what we believe that nothing is going to change our minds, no matter what happens. This is what we believe, and it brings us together. It solidifies us as a people.
Okay, good. Anybody
Sheila.
else want to add to what Denise had?
Sheila.
Or take
I'm
it in a
looking at
different
the line, joyous the people who are so favored. That word favored might create that feeling of anti-Semitism toward us from other people.
What if you're not favored? Who are,
Right. But, I'm just looking, the word favored might create that feeling from others to us.
Sheila, where have
Yes.
you heard that? What's the expression that's used to describe us as a favored people? Or anybody else?
Chosen people, the chosen people.
The chosen
The chosen
people.
people.
All right, the chosen people. Okay, where does that get you? How does that impact on us or on others around us? All right, good. All these comments are great. Anything else? Anybody wants to add?
Marlene and then Anne.
Well,
Okay.
just picking up on what Sheila and Ellen just said, obviously favored and chosen, that can create anger or frustration or jealousy or a desire to prove it wrong, that you are not actually favored. The text may say that. You may believe that, but in the real world between people, this is what's going on. We don't
There's
want
tremendous irony in there, isn't there? that
I
we're
guess
anything
so.
but chosen. We're given this benefit here. It's not a benefit of experiencing anti-Semitism. Great. What a great idea. Okay, anybody else? Who's
Anne.
next? Anne, okay.
Yeah, if just looking at that one paragraph that you're showing, happy are they who dwell in your house. So that's made you separate. It's your house.
Okay.
No one else is there but you and your family. So the anti-Semitism I often feel comes from those who don't understand and see these separate people who are maybe different, and their group. And so there's that fear, and that's the I see.
All right,
So
good.
to pick up on that, what else does the idea of a word house, who dwell in your house, what do you think that means in your house in this prayer?
Okay, I mean,
Jill.
you know, I'm looking at this, and I guess you don't always read it, anti-Semitism into everything. But when I look at this, I look at, I guess, more positively, that happy are the people who dwell in your house, able to praise for. I look at that as your family, as your immediate family. And when you look at joy, so the people who are favored, joy is more like your kihila and your community. And I guess I look at it at a more positive aspect of the prayer. So, I mean,
okay.
Jamie.
You know, it's a different prompt, right, Jill? Not everything is anti-Semitism. Okay. Jamie?
I'm still suffering from laryngitis, but I just want to extend on what she just said, is that it's not just having a house, it's having a relationship with God.
Because who's the your?
Yeah.
They capitalize it here because they mean that.
Yeah, God's house. I mean, tying this back to anti-Semitism here, it's like, our version of God, you can't be happy without our version of God. Well, you are happy with a different version of God. That does cause some friction.
So just to give it a completely different interpretation, I was studying this with a group at my synagogue, and the woman who was leading the class, she said she wants to use this with middle schoolers to talk about body positivity, that your house is your body, and are you happy dwelling in that house? Are you happy with who you are? So that's just, a completely different interpretation than we've been talking about here.
And there's your extended metaphor too of the image of the house.
Shows the variety.
Yeah.
Just a couple more of these questions. Why did they use they? They shall praise you. Happy are they who dwell in your house. Shouldn't it be us? Happy are we who dwell in your house. We shall praise you forever. Why is it in third person there? Just something to think about. What do you notice in the Hebrew?
You could have a whole new thing with the word they now. I mean, if you put it into today's
pronouns,
it's they and them. They is now can be singular. So I'm just thinking about the way, yeah.
Good. Pick
Maddie,
your prompt.
Did you have something?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. When I think of happy are they who dwell in your house, I think of family, and the Judaism and family, a strong sense of family are very important concepts. And that's what I think about.
Right. So here's 2 lines of this prayer, and all of this from just looking at it, reading it, and thinking about it. What do you notice in the Hebrew? Well, here it's kind of clear the way I wrote it out. I mean, and I mentioned before that this prayer is an acrostic. You have every line that starts with Aleph on this, and then it goes on, and we have that next one too. So, just, we wanted to work through this. This is the kind of things we want you to think about. So,
and you notice you did not have to take the whole prayer. Just that in this case, it was just 2 lines. And yet you could pick any one of these prompts and really develop it in a 2-minute kind of writing.
And what does it mean to be joyous? Joyous in all of these, joyous, the people who are favored, the people whose God is Adonai, who dwell in your house. How are you joyous? What,
And why are you joyous?
and why are you joyous? Right. Is it just the fact that you dwell in the house that automatically, what if you don't feel joyous that day?
Right.
You
And
know,
who makes you joyous?
And what makes you homeless or houseless?
Can you be joyous without a house?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ellen's getting ready to leave, but we have
I am.
a little bit more. So do you want to say anything before you?
No, just understand that there's a lot here to work from. You really need to limit this. Don't feel obliged in any way just because we went through so many of them. We gave you lots to choose from. Focus on one of these kinds of things. And if you've got a prompt that we didn't ask, believe me, there are plenty more out there. Feel free, absolutely, to use it as a way of kind of getting some of these ideas. You're generating ideas. All right, Julia, you're going to take the commentary bit here.
Yeah.
And is there another slide? I don't
Yeah,
even
there's
remember.
the writing.
Okay. And
So
if you wanna, we can do the exercise as part of the beginning of the next session.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. You too.
Thanks, Ellen and Julia.
Happy
Students.
Thanksgiving.
Very wonderful teaching. Again, we're
Let's
grateful.
just continue on with these slides for a little bit.
All right, Julia, thank you.
Sure. So you can look at the commentaries. You can use Rav Google. You can go to your library. You can go to your shul library. You can talk to people. But again, we don't want you to summarize, especially with a Devar Torah. It's not as easy when you have a prayer like this to summarize, but you can sometimes. This is a prayer of, thanks, happiness. You become less creative the more that you read, I think, because you become locked in sometimes to what you're reading and you don't see any other way, to do it. So it can keep you from being a little spontaneous. And don't settle for these common interpretations. Maybe go on and do you agree or use the interpretation as a basis to agree or disagree with it. Why is it right? Why isn't it right? I don't think that's right at all. I think it's completely the opposite. That's why we have Hillel and Shammai, because we want to be pluralistic. We want all these opinions. We don't want just one person's opinion on it. We want to hear all the different ones. And then look for a perspective or come up with your own perspective on the text. So then once you've gotten all these thoughts and you want to start writing this into something, just start jotting down the ideas. They may not be connected. They may not start at the beginning or the end. Just get these different thoughts down, like the ones that we were talking about. And read what you've written and try to underline the most important point. So, is it what is a house on our example that we just did? Is that the thing? You have all these different ideas, but what do you think is the most important of what we discussed? Is it this part about being the chosen people, or is it the part about what is this house that we're living in? Or maybe it's I want to talk about the difference in this translation. What is the difference between happy and blessed? That's what I want to focus on. Is there one thing? If you can't find the point, circle back through and go through it again. Read the prompt questions again. Do this free write. There'll be something that jumps out that gives you a hook, something to write on. Then, if you can, start writing at the beginning, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just need to jump in and start writing and then write the introduction. Maybe the rabbi that we watched, maybe she had this idea about the water and the text, and she wanted to bring in the comic book writing, but she didn't really know how to, and then she went back to the beginning and used that, her interview, as a way to present that and to sort of structure it. So whichever way works for you, but the idea is to get it down and then go back if you need to so that it follows logically. It should have one main idea, but again, sometimes there's lots of these, and sometimes the hardest part is about narrowing it down, because again, 2 to 3 minutes, you can't cover everything. Maybe it's 3 different devars on this one prayer. There can always be more. I know that's a hard thing, especially on a longer Torah portion. You can't talk about the whole thing in 10 minutes. You have to narrow it down, and sometimes things are just so interesting you want to put them in, but you gotta put them aside for a separate time, and they'll still keep. And then again, like this rabbi, let your personality come through. If it's funny, if it's, or if it's a mistake, you want to talk about some mistake that you made and something you learned from it. If you want to talk about something, something personal with your family or your job, or, whatever, let yourself come through. It doesn't have to be so cut and dried. This is the prayer I'm going to analyze, and this is what I think about it. Bring in some of your personality. And then just a couple more things. If you feel passionately one way or the other, talk about that passion. If you really disagree with, well, I don't think it should have been, I don't think they should have talked about, your house. We need to be inclusive. There is one prayer where it talks about specifically excluding the foreigners, or I can't think of it right now, but some people skip that prayer. They don't want to read that because they feel that it's too exclusive. Some people don't read the prayers that talk about the sacrifices. They, in our Siddur, it has these alternate prayers you can read. So if you feel strongly about one way or the other, let them know that in your writing. Sermons give answers, devars raise questions. So don't feel like you have to come up with all the answers or any answers. You can leave people thinking, and if you notice, your rabbis probably do this so that you have something to talk about at Kiddush. Like, oh, what, I thought this, no, I thought this. I mean, they're not telling you what to think. We know what, and that was the next thing. See, move right into it. Don't tell them what to think. Let your reader think about it and find the answer themselves. And maybe they'll come up with something different, or maybe they'll agree with you and say, yeah, that was a really good point, but I think this. A grabber beginning. So the rabbi had this beginning where, I didn't grow up, I never wanted to be a rabbi kind of thing. Then you just want to hear, okay, well, now she's standing at her ordination. How did she get there? She sets it up knowing that she's going to explain this, or you hope that she's going to explain in the next 5-10 minutes how she got there. But that's her hook at the very beginning. I didn't want to be a rabbi. I wanted to be a comedian. It can be a question. It can be just a story that you have that doesn't seem like it's related, but then you relate it. Something about like I don't know. I mean, I'm just doing this on the fly, but if you're talking about your house, what does your house mean? Well, you came into your house and it was really messy. And, you just thought about how you had to get it all cleaned up. Is it still like a house of God if you live in a messy house? And how you've come to terms with that? Or I don't know, just some kind of story, quick story. And then an ending is, again, you can end it with a question, leave it open-ended, don't bring in new ideas, don't go to introduce something else because you want to close it. You can leave people hanging there and asking, oh yeah, really, I wonder about that. What was that? So any questions on this writing part? Okay. So now we have part 2.
Yes,
of
I did have, I want to verify that you're going to put this all like on a PDF that we will be able to see it.
It will be in a PowerPoint.
I don't know what that means in a PowerPoint.
And the program is, that's how, if you look at any slides from a presentation, I'll see if I can convert it to a PDF for you.
Thank you. Or just let me know how I can get a hold of all of this, because I didn't
Okay.
write it down because I want to pay attention now.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. We didn't want you to write this down furiously. So this was the last section, and we took the first 2 lines of Ashrei that we did are sort of the intro, and now these are the next 2 lines, and you can see it starts with Aleph and then Bet. So this is the first 2 lines started with both with Aleph. This is also with Aleph and then with Bet. So this starts the acrostic alphabet, but it's not alphabetical in English. Sometimes they do make it alphabetical in English as well. This one is not. So if you read these lines, I exalt you, my God, my sovereign, I praise your name always. Every day I praise you, glorifying your name always. Great is Adonai, greatly to be praised, though your greatness is unfathomable. So this time we didn't give you any prompts. So just reading this translation that I took, what do you think of? What strikes you about this?
Everything is about praising. I see it, you see it in every line. I praise you and I praise you and to be
So
praised.
what does that mean? What does it mean to praise you? What are you supposed to do?
Making you holy, making God above you and making God special.
How do you do that?
Prayer.
It doesn't tell you.
It doesn't tell you.
I mean, it says praise God, but doesn't say what you're supposed to do.
Is that when you pray?
By praying?
Prayer is a way of praising God and glorifying his name, right?
Okay.
Or it could be saying thank you.
Okay.
I mean, you're thinking something wonderful happens and you go, thank you, God. We were at the cemetery the other day. And my husband said, do you have any stones? And I said, no. And I looked around and I said, aha, God provides. Right in front, of course, probably what happened is it had fallen off from that, but it was a military cemetery. So it was very clean and very pristine, but right there.
So there you go. There's a little anecdote.
Yes, and I said, thank you. God provides, and
but what does it mean to say I praise your name always? How do you
it's in the
praise
back of your mind.
always?
I think it means
something
the
good happens,
truth.
you say.
Does it mean just to truly have faith at all times, no matter what?
Okay. Marlene?
You're muted.
Sorry, to follow up what Lily had said, it's not something that, like a fair weather friend. It's the deepest of commitment and belief. And just to go back to one of your earlier questions, Julia, you asked how this may have been different from the other section that we reviewed. This is in the, well, at least it starts off in the first person with I and my, and I praise my sovereign, I praise you, where it was, I think, in they, you know.
Right. And
in the
actually, I
person.
think if you look through it, I don't, well,
Actually,
I don't
from
have the
two
whole thing,
different
but it
psalms.
alternates.
The beginning is from a different psalm.
Right. There, it's a combination of psalms that are put together in to make up the prayer that we call Ashrei. But I think it
It's said 3
alternates.
times a day. That's the importance that the rabbis placed on it.
Right. And why is that? You know, you may not have known that it's that you say it 3 times a day, but if you did like a little research and you learned that, you could start thinking, why is this so important that they included it in every service that we have? Hang on, Arlene, I see you, but Marlene, did you have anything else?
Oh, no, thank you. I didn't want to hug.
Okay,
hug
and
the floor.
Eileen, your hand's still up. Are you? Okay, so Dana and then Denise and then Arlene.
So my thought on praising your name always, I think of it in terms of doing and the ethics that you live by.
So always could mean, I mean, the next one says every day, but is always basically for all time? Or is it always like every minute of the day? You know, what does it mean to you always? I mean, you're constantly maybe doing mitzvah or thinking of, you know, God in everything that you do, but maybe it's for all time. Like, you know,
Well, that's
so
why
it
I
could
was saying,
mean that too. I'm not, you know, I'm not saying one is right or not. I'm just asking the questions.
so what I was saying, if you're, what does it mean to praise? And I think of it in terms of living with good deeds.
Okay, so praising through your deeds. Denise.
Well, I took my hand down because I tried to, because Dana said what I was going to say. To me,
okay,
there are different ways to praise, and to me, it's how I live my life.
Okay. So, you know, and even in these, I mean, we only focused on this one thing. You could say, oh, well, these 2 lines don't have as much as the first 2 lines. But just using that theme of praise, whether it could be a jumping off point for something that's not really related to the prayer, but just the idea is, it doesn't, Devar Tefillah, it doesn't have to always be an analysis of the prayer. It's not, it doesn't have to be an academic piece. You know, it could be something like Eileen said about starting with the story about the cemetery and God provides. And what does that mean that God provides? Maybe you go off from that point, you know, on some other time that God provided, or some time that God, you know, I don't know, I'm just thinking there's the line in you know, in the Jacob story where, you know, God was there and I didn't know it. And do you know, you hear we're praising God always, but do you always know that God is there? You thought you saw the pebble and you know, thought God was there. I don't know. I mean, there's just, you know, if you sat and brainstormed. So I think what we're going to ask you to do, I'll send it out, but we'll have you go through some of these things. So we have 5, you know, what ideas or topics, and we have like 1 through 5 there to fill out. So we may ask you to do that. We'll send you this page again. So don't worry about, you know, jumping in and doing it till you hear from us, because we may want to do a whole, you know, kind of a writing, a practical writing thing for a class too. So I know we're at 9 o'clock, so we're going to finish up. If anybody came on late and we just asked everyone to put in the chat now as we're assigning parts of the service. If you didn't say whether you were coming to convention or not, please add that into the chat. So that we have it. We're working on some people, even some people who said that they were coming when we did that survey a long time ago, didn't check off any prayers that they wanted to do. I think what we're going to be doing is assigning everyone who's going to be there in person a part of a prayer to lead, in addition to if you're working on Torah reading with Rabbi Sella. We also have some parts of the service that can be pre-recorded if you're not going to be in person. And so you'll have the chance to do that too.
Julia?
Yes.
I am not as schooled as perhaps many of my sisters here and all these things. So, and I have to use different resources to help me. I
That's
know
fine.
to stay away from this and stay away from that, but whether it's music, whether it's listening to something to be inspired by, whether it's reading something to get some inspiration, I think it really truly helps me.
But that's exactly the point, that you're getting inspiration from reading it. You're not taking what you're reading and saying that that's the answer. You're taking whatever resources and making them your own. That's all we're asking.
Okay.
We just would rather have you look at it and think about it and then go to the sources instead of just doing that automatically. So, this is all in English, and it's really your feeling. What is the feeling when you read this? Do you feel inspired to praise? Is it over the top? Is it, something that you see is manageable? That's all. We're just asking questions about it at first. We're not, and we said, these are other sources you can use. You can look online. It's harder for the prayers because there isn't as much commentary on the prayers. But remember, most of the prayers in the service are Psalms. We studied the Psalms in Makom, and there was certainly the whole book of commentaries that we used for that. So there are commentaries out there. You may not, just be able to like Google Ashrei. You might have to look at the three Psalms like Faye mentioned that make up Ashrei and find the sources there.
By the way, at the end of that ordination, there was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful version of Adon Olam, I believe, at the end.
How'd it go?
Julia, can you stop share so we can
Oh,
see?
I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry. I have it up. I'm so sorry. Here, let me do it.
There we go.
I went for two screens today, so I could see all of you, but I didn't realize I still had it up, so I apologize.
Can I make another just suggestion or something because I've come across this. When you go onto the net to Rav Google, you get all type of sites there. And I for myself, I have felt that I don't want to go onto the sites that are actually Christian, and it's hard to tell. You have
Right.
to.
There are a lot of Messianic Jews,
Right.
and there are a lot of Christian sites, and there's a lot of if you go on the Aish site or on Chabad, it's a whole different perspective
True.
than what you're getting from a conservative point of view.
Right.
Safari is the best because they are conservative.
Safari, right, and
that's the one Rabbi Shella uses all the time.
Also, the Jewish Theological Seminary has a lot online to share.
Right. So, again, we're not asking this by the next class or next week or whatever it is. This is going to be a process over the next 7 months. And we're going to be circling back to it. Again, this won't be the only time that we cover this. Jill.
Oh, you're going to be assigning us a prayer? Is that how it's going to work, or for the future? I'm just curious.
We're not sure yet. If you have any input, it could be the prayer that, you mean assigned a prayer to lead or to?
Well, no, I'm not talking about leading. I'm talking about to do this Devar Tefillah. I mean,
I'm happy to take input on that.
Okay.
In a way, I would like you to see what speaks to you, but that could be overwhelming too, to have to read through the whole Siddur and find something, you know, and as we just see here, like anybody, you could find something in any prayer.
Are we looking at just at the weekday Shacharit service? Is that
right?
Okay.
Right. I mean, I guess it would include the Torah service too and after, but like the Monday service. So the prayers that you will be saying on you know, at convention.
So how do we choose what we're going to write
Well,
about?
that's what so that's what I'm saying. We could assign it, or you could choose one, or we could assign it, and if you don't like what we assign, you can choose a different one.
I think that's probably the best way.
Would that set your mind at ease more than having
you
to
can look through the prayer book and pick something that's that you like. Do you have a favorite prayer? I mean, I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying often, I don't know about you, but when I sit in synagogue, a lot of times I look at some of the prayers and, I do have a couple that are favorites of mine. So I'm just saying, unless you want them to assign it, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want you to stress out over picking one. We can assign it, but if you do have a favorite prayer, you can switch to that one. It's not like we need one for every prayer. If several of you want to write on the same prayer, that's fine too. You know, we don't need an anthology for every prayer that we're doing. It doesn't have to be one-to-one, because like we said, it will be much different. I mean, it will be, different people will write on different aspects of it. So, but we'll have more information out about that. Again, this isn't something that should stress you out. So we want this to be a good experience, and just, you may have to do this, or you may want to do this on other occasions for your synagogue, or, for a sisterhood meeting. A lot of people start the meetings with a Dvar Torah, Dvar Tefillah. So it's always a good skill to have. And we ran over a little bit, so thank you. We will send something out about the next class. I know I put the date in, but I need to confirm that. Our next topic. So just watch for email.
Thank you. This was a great lesson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you,
Hello to everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving to the Americans.
Thank you.
And
You too.
Thanksgiving.
again, if you put it in the chat, if you're going to be there, if you haven't yet, and then I'll save the chat. We just don't want to assign, assign parts if you. And there's been, I know, a couple of times now that we've asked, and some of you were no's and now, or were maybes and are now yeses, and so we just. But I hope the trope classes are going well for those taking that, and I will see you next month, if not before.
Okay.
I'll say some of you